The Valley of Jesus is one of the most bizarre places ever built on the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft, because the entire thing was constructed by thieves with millions of blocks that they had stolen. Not exactly a holy place. Over 50 giant replicas were constructed in the same area, with each statue being made out of a different stolen material. You had terracotta Jesus, you had creeper head Jesus, even TNT Jesus, which required some extra precautions. So as a normal human being, you're probably wondering, why would people build something like this, especially on the most toxic Minecraft server in existence? Well, the reason these thieves came together like this might actually surprise you, so today, we'll be discussing the bizarre history of the Valley of Jesus on 2b2t, and the large amount of challenges that were overcome in order for this holy place to be built. To understand why the Valley of Jesus is such a bizarre place, we need to go back to the beginning. Our story begins in 2021, while the entire world was in lockdown. During this time, a player named Bobbers22 started building a reputation as a stash hunter. You see, on a server like 2b2t, if you're not part of a group base or a faction that has duped countless items, one of the only ways to amass wealth is to steal it yourself from other players. Bobbers would travel far and wide across the server in search of item stashes. But being a stash hunter is not as glamorous as you might think. Putting in long hours of traveling each week is the only consistent way of finding anything worthwhile. While the vaults that are located at bases are usually well stocked and aesthetically pleasing to the eye, the reality is most stashes on the server are usually just chests and shulkers lying out in the open. Nothing fancy, just a random place to store a lot of stuff. And there's no guarantee that they'll even have useful items or anything at all. The hard work, patience, and luck involved usually discourages most players from taking stash hunting seriously. But during his travels, Bobbers would become friends with other hunters in the community just like him, putting in long hours with the hopes of a big score. To call them a group of thieves sounds a bit cliche, but that's exactly what they were. They were taking the items of others for their own benefit. As time went on, Bobbers managed to find several high-profile stashes. This helped him build his reputation. He would go on to steal millions of items from these locations. He stored all of them in his own item stash, where he kept everything organized. Now, this is the only screenshot I'm allowed to show because 2b2t players could easily find the location if I revealed any more of it. But Bobbers had become so successful that he had a new problem: boredom. What's the point of having millions of items if none of them ever get used? On top of that, his stash had grown so large that he wondered if he would be targeted by other thieves. He couldn't just throw the items away, so what was the game plan? Well, he came up with a bizarre idea. A new take on an old tradition. Building a Minecraft replica of the statue Christ the Redeemer has become somewhat of a server tradition over the past decade, making appearances at multiple bases. They've always been built as a joke, since 2b2t is the farthest you can get from a family-friendly Christian Minecraft server. Bobbers wanted to take this tradition to the extreme limits, and the irony of holy statues being built by a digital criminal was something he couldn't pass up. His idea was to build multiple statues with every type of block he had stolen, including ones that were difficult to place, such as end rods and creeper heads. But building something of this magnitude was going to require help and careful planning. His stash hunting friends agreed to lend a hand, but they weren't exactly the best builders, so they got into contact with a group called the SBA, the Spawn Builders Association. They asked if anyone in the group would be willing to volunteer to help with the project. Anyone that accepted the offer would only need to make the trip out to the build site, which was in a giant mesa biome. All the materials would be provided, and they were to not discuss the details of the project with anyone. Pretty soon, they had a basic roster of builders ready to go, and on November 1st, 2022, construction began. Bobbers had transported the majority of his building blocks from his personal stash over to the build site. over 50 different Minecraft block IDs were assigned to different players. While some would be a single solid color, others would have some variation. The first few statues were quite simple and all followed the same blueprint, but a few of them were a little trickier. Blocks such as creeper heads required an entire second layer underneath just so they could be placed. This effectively meant building two statues in the same place and then deleting one of them at the end, so it was double the work. The TNT Jesus was a challenge because it required a layer of water surrounding it. In case of an accidental ignition, this water was to prevent TNT from flying into the other statues. It might sound like overkill, but you have to remember, in Minecraft, TNT can get thrown long distances under the right conditions. There were some block types that were off limits for the builders, mainly chests, shulkers, and furnaces. Since all of these are technically containers, putting too many together in the same place will sometimes trick the server into thinking that you're building a lag machine or attempting to crash people. This can result in having your account get kicked from the server and even potentially lose priority queue status, so it was not a risk the builders wanted to take. Surprisingly, an enchantment table Jesus was made despite the block technically counting as a container. It was tough to even get close to it because of how badly all the spinning books could lower someone's frames per second. Because of a notable incident a few years back where enchantment tables were weaponized, some were concerned that the server's admin, Housemaster, might just show up and straight up delete the statue, but somehow it snuck under the radar. The builders were able to request more materials, and Bobbers would head back to his main stash and bring the blocks that were needed. After a few weeks of construction on the project, over 1 million blocks had been placed in total across all statues. They still had a ways to go, but this was where the fatigue started setting in. Building the exact same thing over and over can get old really quickly. When Bobbers asked for a second round of volunteers from the SBA, many had no interest or thought the project sounded outright ridiculous. It was a tough sell, but despite these morale issues, progress continued. One of the builders, Minecraft Simon, figured out a way to make the construction of Cauldron Jesus more simple, using Baritone, which is a program that automates actions in Minecraft. He was able to trick the game into thinking that cauldrons were actually iron blocks, which allowed them to be placed without any additional setup. It was small little hacks like this that got rid of some of the headaches the builders faced. In December of 2022, 1 month after construction had begun, over 50 Jesus statues had been completed. But since they had started running out of block IDs to use, the variations became a little more creative. And over the next few weeks, little by little, more statues continued to pop up. Having this many in one place really helped visualize just how many blocks Bobbers had stolen over the years. To see a number on an inventory screen is one thing, but to see all of these blocks spread out is something else entirely. Now, you might be thinking that this is the part where the base gets griefed, the coordinates get leaked, or one of the group members betrays the team. But surprisingly, there was no drama involved in this base, which for a group of thieves is shocking. Perhaps it was divine intervention after all, that 23 builders and stash hunters could keep something like this a secret. But the group approached me so that they could finally reveal their project to the public and officially bring it to a close. The Valley of Jesus is what happens when you take an ironic joke so far that it actually becomes a work of art. And in a chaotic wasteland like 2b2t, sometimes a joke is all it takes to bring people together. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and follow my socials. Take it easy, Fit Fam, and stay alive out there.